one of my favorite passages of scripture is in Philippians 4:11-13, where Paul talks about how he has had plenty, he has been in want, and he has learned to be content in whatever state that he is in. And that is a lesson that I'm trying to learn. I think that it's noble to say, "Oh, I'm fine no matter what," but I think to live that is harder than just saying it. There are times when things come up in life and your circumstances completely change, and you may find yourself not being quite as content. And that's something I'm working on. And I wanted to talk about that today with you all. But before we get too deep into the subject, as promised, I made 2 of my recipes from my blog that usually call for baking powder and baking soda, and I did not add those to the recipe. So I'm making my long fermented pancakes. These are you put flour, sourdough starter, and milk the night before, let it ferment, and then the next day you add the egg, a little more milk. You can add a little bit of sugar and olive oil, but you're supposed to add baking soda. I did not add the baking soda, and instead I whipped up an egg white, just a little bit, so that it was just a little bit fluffy. I probably should have done it more. And next time I do this, I will. I just didn't have it in the right container to get a good whip on the egg. But I folded that in, excuse me, after I got the batter to the consistency that I wanted it, and went ahead and made these up for breakfast. Are they different? Yes, they are different, because when you add the baking soda, it really reacts with the sourdough starter and puffs them up quite a bit. But were they okay enough? Yeah, they were fine. And if I was out of baking soda, these are just fine. There's not anything wrong with them, and we loved them. So, and now the next thing that I'm going to be making is along the same lines, and this is my sourdough biscuit recipe. This one calls for baking soda and baking powder. But I did it different because, okay, I'm going to make a difference in this so that I don't have 2 rises. I thought, would it be better just to do 1 rise and get as much rise as I can out of just the sourdough starter? So what I did was mix up my dough, all of it, and then I rolled it out, folded it a few times to make some layers, and I went ahead and cut them out and put them in my cast iron skillet and just covered it with plastic wrap and let it ferment through the day to see, could I get a good enough biscuit. Now, I could tell a big difference in this recipe without the baking powder. Again, were they good? Of course, they were good. And you can see I was able to get some layers in there, and they turned out just fine. We ate them. We didn't complain, but there is a difference. And so I don't know. I'm a little conflicted because I like the thought of doing it this way because I don't have to buy baking powder and baking soda. But, I don't know. I'm conflicted. So I'm going to show you those biscuits in just a few minutes while I'm mixing up in the same bowl, just another dough. I think I made pizza crust out of this, and I didn't get footage of that, but I like to do these things when I already have a bowl out that I made something like these biscuits in. I'll just go ahead and mix up something else for the rest of the day because it makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to feed my sourdough starter, and then I'm going to show you these biscuits. Of course, they're not as fluffy. They're not as soft and fluffy. Plus, I made these out of hard red wheat, which does make a little bit of a difference. But they were fine. We ate them. They were delicious, just not quite as fluffy. So let's talk about being content. I think that one of the hardest times to be content is in big financial changes. So if you're used to maybe a 2-income home and you go to a 1, which we've done a couple times. I shouldn't say many times, a couple of times. There is this time of, it's uncomfortable, and it's easy to fall into being not content because it's different, because you don't maybe have the exact same resources you had before, and you may think, well, and your mind may even go back 2 times when things were different. But what I have been praying and trying to work out is, okay, how do we learn from Paul and say, no matter what this situation is, I choose to be content. I choose to not look at my circumstances, because one thing that I have learned over the past several years, I would say 5 to 6 years, is how quickly circumstances change, and how we can't rely on the circumstances to give us a feeling of security or a feeling of contentment. It's almost like the joy and peace that you get from serving the Lord. Contentment is something that is a frame of mind. And if we can, get into that frame of mind, then no matter what happens, you're going to be content, because you know that whatever you have and whatever situation you're in, that God knows it. He is in charge. He's taking care of it. And it really isn't something that we need to be that concerned about. Because most of the time, my husband and I were talking about this just the other day, most of the time, I think there's actually studies about this, that like 90-something% of the time, things that we are worried about or thinking about never happen. And it steals something from us. It steals a peaceful and contented life. And that's something that I'm working on. I want to look at every day as a gift and learn to be content in whatever comes my way that particular day. I think it's a struggle. I think as human beings, we have a mindset that can be quite like the children of Israel. Maybe we complain and we because the circumstances aren't quite the way we think they should be. But it's something that I'm working on. I wanted to share with you all because I think that it's important as Christians that we learn this skill that Paul talked about. No matter what, be content, because we know we're in the place that God wants us to be because he brought it our way. And sometimes you have to adjust your life for the circumstances that you're in. And I think that's the most uncomfortable part, to be honest with you. I think it is uncomfortable for us to change our lifestyle based upon our circumstances. And most of the time, that's what we're reacting to. The children of Israel, they were fed, but they didn't do it. They weren't growing the garden. They weren't doing it. And so it was hard for them to trust that the food would come. And even after it would come, they would still, get discontented and complain. And we're no different. We're no different. I know very few people who've mastered this. And it's just something that I think we have to work on. I want to show y'all, this is a brand new recipe that's coming to my blog for sourdough einkorn bagels. I have to say, 100%, these are the bagels for me. These are so soft, and if you like really hard bagels, you can make these hard, but the way that I made them, they're a little softer and fluffier on the inside, and I love them. It's 100% freshly milled einkorn flour with some sourdough starter, I think a tablespoon of sugar, some salt, and I fermented it for about 4 hours on the counter, and then I just put it in the fridge and let it finish for the night. And as you can see, I got a really good ferment out of this. And then I just shaped them, boiled them. I can't say that word very well. Boiled them and baked them. Now, the trick to getting a softer bagel is not to boil them that long. I only had mine in the boiling water for like maybe 45 seconds. Now, if you want to go longer, they will get a more firm crust and be a little firmer, but I prefer mine to be a little softer. So you can totally control that when you're making bagels. But I will say the flavor and the texture of these bagels are my new favorite bread item. I think I'm probably going to be doing these on repeat for a few weeks because I fell in love with them. They're actually super easy to make. Just keep in mind that einkorn flour is way stickier than working with other flours. It is, it doesn't like to be worked very much. I just did stretch and folds, I think 3 on this dough, and let it rise for about 4 hours, put it in the refrigerator, and then the next morning I got them out, shaped them, let them rise for another 2 hours, and preheated my oven to 425. I boiled them in some water with a tablespoon of baking soda, and then I put some everything seasoning on top and baked them for 23 minutes, and they were perfection. And so I'm so glad that you all joined me for another video, and I'm enjoying having these types of videos where we talk about things that maybe don't get talked about a lot, but that mean so much in our Christian walk and in our life in general. I saw this thing where there was a video this lady made about a book that she was reading, and it was about how that we as a society are takers and not givers. And it wasn't as much talking about money, but talking about our time and our resources, and how that can fulfill us and teach us to be more content. It seems counterintuitive to say, oh, I'm going to give more and I'll be more content, but it's making a lot of sense to me, and it's something that I'm praying about and I want to work on. I really appreciate y'all joining me for these videos though, and I hope that we can open discussions and we can talk about these things that sometimes just don't get talked about that often. All right, we'll be looking for this recipe on my blog and therosehomestead.com, and we'll see you next week.